제가 계속 같은 꿈을 꾸는데요.
저는 귀에서 띵 하고 소리가 나는데.
꿈속에서 계속 귀신이 쫓아오거든요. 근데 문제는 그 귀신이 올 누드라는 거죠.
미쳤냐 그만해!
남자 귀신이거든.
선생님, 뭐가 문제죠? 저 여기 누울까요?
Hi. Oh, I mean, 안녕. Anyway, so I'm back, and I want to talk about another show. Now, I want to continue my little Is a Monster Born or Made series, and I want to do the show that started it all for me, the show that dives deep into this question and gave me the idea for the series anyway. I talk more about that in the intro of my monster video, but this show is from 2011. It's a Korean drama, and it was kind of like, I guess, like a special back then. Now, the first time I watched this show was, I don't know, 2017, 2018 maybe, and I was so sucked in. There's 8 episodes, and they just, like, I couldn't stop watching. Like, I binged the whole thing. And so all these years later, watching it again, it is just as good as I remember it. And that show is White Christmas. I thought it was sort of appropriate considering the season, although I'm doing this after Christmas. Anywho, I was thinking that I think I'm gonna split this into 2 videos simply because there's kind of 2 mysteries to this story. And so this video is gonna cover the first mystery. Now, the mysteries do intertwine, but they are separate. So this first one I'm going to refer to as the letter. Okay, that's this mystery, the letter. Okay, let me stop rambling because I'm getting tired of my rambles. Let's just get into it. 2011 K-drama, White Christmas. Warning. Viewer discretion is advised, as the show we're going to discuss is a psychological thriller with themes and imagery of violence, death, self-harm, bullying, and isolation. This subject matter can be a sensitive topic, so please proceed with caution. This show takes place at the elite boarding school, nestled in the snowy mountains of Gangwon-do, called Shushin High School. This is basically a sky school where only the top 0.1% of teens are admitted. However, as elite as it is, the students there refer to it more as a prison school, probably because it's in the middle of nowhere. Now, it's December 24th. Which means everybody gets to go home. Everybody gets to go home for 8 days and enjoy their Christmas break with their families. All but 8. 7 students stay behind after receiving a letter that reads, "I kept thinking about it. When did it all begin? You tainted me, made me pitiful. You made me a monster in the corner. You silenced me. You ridiculed my false hopes. You took the only thing I had and put it around your neck. I held out my hand and you let go. You deleted me from your eyes. Finally, you took over me. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. After 8 days, walk up the path by the 𝐓𝐴 tree. Under the clock tower, you will see someone dead. The night that Jesus was born, I curse you. Out of curiosity, fear, guilt, they all decide to stay behind and wait for the 8th day to come. That night, all the students meet for dinner, unaware that they have all received this letter. So they sit there, sizing each other up, wondering which one of them sent the letter, which one of them is playing games. So let's do some introductions for our characters. I've changed their names because there's a lot of characters in this show, and so that we don't get confused or anything like that, I have changed the characters' names. Some of them are just shortened versions of their actual names, and others I've just changed altogether, just to make things less confusing. So starting off with Moon. Moon is very much the Sherlock, you know, he's the leader of the group. He gives that vibe. Then we have Q, who is very much his Watson. Shy a little bit, kind of quiet, but clearly smart. Then we have 𝐲𝐿. 𝐲𝐿 is our self-proclaimed journalist. He's always carrying around a video camera and documenting everything. And also, I only mention this because it will be relevant. 𝐲𝐿 is hearing impaired, so he does have a cochlear. Then we have Jay. Jay, his nickname amongst the students is literally the Plague. So I'm sure you can tell how he's gonna be. He's very much clearly the stereotypical bully character, and he clearly likes to pick on 𝐲𝐿. Then we have Angel. Angel is his nickname actually that the students have given him, which we will find out why later. He is emo boy. Always wearing like a leather jacket. He looks really cool actually. He likes playing guitar, that kind of thing. Then we have Chi, who is our resident ice prince. If you don't know what an ice prince is typically a very handsome guy that is cold in personality, but where he lacks in personality, he makes up for it with looks and usually some sort of talent. Usually it's smarts, book smarts, which is exactly the kind of guy that Chi is. Chi is very book smart. When it comes to personality though, he's rather icy and not good with social skills. Then we have Sunny. So I gave her this name because it's very ironic. Sunny is actually a sad girl, although she is apparently the most popular girl at their school. Last but not least, we have the teacher that of course has to stay behind with them because students cannot be alone for 8 days on a remote campus without adult supervision. So the teacher I will be calling Sem. If I don't call him Sen, I will be referring to him as the teacher. So that is who we have sat at the dinner table. So tensions are obviously high, and it's pretty clear that these people are not friends and probably won't interact otherwise unless they have to. They probably pass each other in the hallways or have classes together, but they are not close. Now their awkward dinner gets cut short anyways because the security alarm goes off, alerting them that somebody is at the gate. This obviously startles everyone. So Moon, Q, 𝐲𝐿, and Sem all go to check it out. So they all walk outside and they go down to the gates where they see a man that's clearly distressed, he's injured, and they're like, what the heck? And he claims to have just been in a car accident, so he needs a little help. He wants to use the phone. So they bring the stranger up to the infirmary to treat his head wound. And while they're up there, Moon calls the police, and, you know, he's like, hey, there's this guy here, he got into a car accident, needs some help, obviously. And the police are like, yeah, is he like super badly injured? And Moon checks with him and he says no, so he's like, well, no. Was there anybody else involved in the accident? He checks with him, He says no. Moon says no. And they're like, great, because we can't get up there. You guys are literally in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, okay? And there's a snowstorm. The roads are completely covered in snow. They won't be plowed for a few days. We just can't get up there right now. So if he's not badly injured, you know. Hangs up the phone. Then he asks, do you want to call anybody else? He asks the stranger, do you want to call anybody else? It is Christmas Eve after all. And he thinks about it for a moment, gives Moon the number to call. Moon calls and just simply says, hey, you know, so-and-so has been in an accident, he's all right, and that's that. This man introduces himself as Dr. Johan, and he will now be staying with them until the police can come, which probably won't be for several days. So now that Johan is all stitched up or whatever, the boys return to their dorms, and as they're walking back, Jay takes it upon himself to be a jerk for no apparent reason, and he starts throwing snowballs at Kong's head. Kong gets upset because if his cochlear gets wet, it will stop working. Thus, he will not be able to hear, so he gets pissed off. And Jay takes this as an opportunity to be like, why are you even doing this? Why are you doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And Kong's just like, what are you talking about? Like, doing what? I didn't do anything to you. And he throws him on the ground and starts trying to beat him up for no reason. And then he reveals the letter. He takes the black envelope out of his pocket and throws it on the ground next to him like this. This is what I'm talking about. And he accuses Kong of sending the letter. And Kong's like, I didn't send that. Look, I got one too. And he pulls it out of his pocket. The same envelope. Now, Moon overhears this and sees this commotion, and he runs over and he's like, wait, you guys got letters too? In the morning, the students regroup. Now that they are all aware that they have all received this letter, you know, they discuss, and some of them think that this is just some like cruel joke. Others aren't so sure. But what they all do agree on is that it's too risky to tell Sem. Because if they tell him, and this letter turns out to be true, and they have something to do with it, the supposed death that is supposed to happen on the 8th day, they could get in trouble. And considering they go to an elite boarding school and are all rich kids with powerful parents, this would not go well. Wouldn't look good on their records. It could just ruin their young lives before it even starts. So they decide to keep it a secret. Now their little discussion gets interrupted when Sem shows up with Dr. Johan. And Johan formally introduces himself to all of the students as a psychologist. Now, upon hearing his profession, Moon takes it upon himself to pull Johan aside when the rest of them are shoveling the pathways outside. And he tells him that he has this letter, and a friend of his wrote it, and he just wants to know what Johan thinks in his professional opinion. Johan reads the letter, and after a moment he tells Moon that in his professional opinion, whoever wrote this letter is very depressed and in a fragile state, and should seek help ASAP. Now, this is enough to shake Moon up. This is enough for Moon to 100% believe that this letter is legit, which means Moon has to go into full detective mode to figure out who sent this letter before the 8th day. Moon and Q start their investigation, and they have to figure out how all of them are connected. Because they're clearly not friends, they don't run in the same circles, and half of them don't really seem to like each other. So how are they connected enough to a singular person that they've all wronged in some way enough to receive this letter? So their investigation starts with Angel. They go to Angel's room and, you know, they start asking him the basic questions like, when did you receive the letter? Where was the letter when you received it? And blah, blah, blah. which doesn't really get them any closer to any kind of answers, until Q starts touching this statue that Angel has in the corner of his room. He seems to have these statues in all the corners of his room, and they are Mary statues. And Angel kind of freaks out, and he's like, don't touch that. You know, leave it exactly as it is, because it keeps away the corner monster. Now, this rings bells in Moon's ears because it's the exact same wording as the letter. And so they're intrigued. They're like, well, what is the corner monster? And Angel says that he's been haunted by this monster for years. And he describes this corner monster as having a blue mark, like a birthmark, on its face. So this is about the only clue that they actually have so far. So they leave Angel and they go to the library to look at student files. Unfortunately, they do not find any students with a blue birthmark on their face. Moon and Q go to Chi next, and they ask him if he's ever noticed any student with a blue birthmark on their face. Chi thinks about it for about a second before saying, no, I don't think so. Q notably scoffs at this, catching both of their attention. And he's kind of like, well, I just find it funny that you would even ask him that. You know, he probably doesn't even know the only students in his class. So this is very typical of an ice prince, and it's very clear that she does not have social skills. Anyway, that being said, after Q says this, Chi says, you deleted me from your eyes, a quote from the letter. This of course piques their interest, and Chi says that he believes there are 8 sins within the letter, which one would refer to each of them. He believes his is you deleted me from your eyes. After Chi reveals this information, Moon goes into full investigation, and he goes back to his room and digs through his closet. He's looking for something, and he finds this old newspaper, and it all comes flooding back to him. He believes his sin has something to do with their first year of high school. So there was an incident. Sunny had a stalker that would often mail her poems, leave letters in her locker, and one day she lost her USB. But when she went to her locker, she found a note telling her that the USB was in her green sweatpants. She of course rushed back to her room to look in her sweatpants, finding the green USB. This infuriated her because she thought that the stalker was now invading her personal space by going in her room and planting the USB in her pants. Seemingly, the stalker's advances are escalating, and out of fear, she tells Moon. So she asks Moon for help on the matter. And the next letter she receives, she doesn't even look at it, she doesn't want to see it, she just gives it straight to Moon to deal with. Moon decides that he thinks the only way to get rid of this stalker is if he provokes him. So Moon takes that poem that was sent to Sunny and he publishes it in their school newspaper under his name, claiming it as his work, basically. Now, he does this because he thinks one of two things is going to happen. Either the stalker will just stop altogether and not bother Sunny anymore, or the stalker will now focus his attention on Moon, thus leaving Sunny alone. Now, this love poem that Moon published, it uses the same verbiage as the letter they all received. It uses the quote, "You ridiculed my false hopes." This refers to Sunny, which means the other quote from the letter that would refer to Moon's sin would be, "You took the only thing I had and put it around your neck." Basically referring to you stole my poem and published it under your own name. Now, this is an actual break in the case, because this means whoever Sunny's stalker was is the same person that wrote the letter. After figuring this out, Moon decides to gather everybody up and regroup to tell them about the new information. Now, they all understand that apparently there's a sin for each of them in this letter. But if there's 8 sins, there's only 7 students. So who's the eighth sin for? Now, realistically speaking, there could be another, student who received a letter, they just didn't stay behind for the Christmas break. Maybe they didn't believe the letter, maybe it wasn't a big deal to them, so they simply just left. That's obviously an option, but we'll just focus on the students that we do have currently. So everyone sits in the cafeteria to eat breakfast, and as they're sitting there eating, the radio is playing in the background, and the news is kind of giving updates on a killer that's on the loose, and that they haven't caught this person yet, and blah, blah, blah. And it brings up the topic of whether bad people are born that way or made that way. Now, Chi speaks up, and he makes a point. He questions whether or not bad people should be punished when they were doomed from the start. Whether it's a malfunction in their DNA or they were raised in bad conditions. Is it really their fault when they do bad things, when they were clearly set up to fail from the start? Now, this intrigues Dr. Johan, and he asks him, do you think bad people shouldn't be punished? He thinks for a moment and says, I think they should be punished. I'm not saying they shouldn't, it's just I wonder if the ethical or emotional criticism is right. Moon decides to chime in, and he says it shouldn't matter, it doesn't matter whether someone was born with a malfunction in their DNA that made them evil, or if they grew up in terrible conditions, because at the end of the day, they still chose to commit a crime. Thus, they should receive punishment for such crime. A very interesting conversation for breakfast. Later, everyone disperses. They go about their own day. And we zero in on Angel, who is left alone with his crumbling mind. And he sees the corner monster. The corner monster's there, it shows up despite his Mary statues in every corner. And so, frustrated, he starts breaking all of these statues, which of course the shattering sound is making a lot of noise. And Moon and Q, they run into his room, seeing the remnants of the statues everywhere and seeing Angel in a very obvious fragile state. And they ask him what's going on, and he points and says the corner monster's there. The corner monster's back. So Moon presses the issue and asks him, well, what does the corner monster look like? And he says that the corner monster is a child that has a blue mark on his face. Which confuses Moon because originally Angel only described the corner monster as having a blue mark on its face. Thus, they thought perhaps it was a student. Moon asks him if the corner monster takes any other forms. Angel says that it's usually a child, except one time. One time during their first year school trip. And then we get a flashback. Angel's in his hotel room alone, and suddenly he's being attacked by someone who's not a child, but has the same blue mark on his face as the corner monster. Of course, he freaks out. In the commotion, the corner monster drops his wallet, revealing a picture of Sunny. It seems the corner monster on their school trip was likely Sunny's stalker. Once Moon and Q find out about Angel's encounter with the corner monster during their school trip, they recruit Kang to go through his footage, since he's always filming everything and documenting stuff because he's a self-proclaimed journalist, to look at the footage from the school trip to see if anybody there had a blue mark on their face. So Kang combs through his footage and he finds it. He finds video footage of none other than the Plague, aka Jay, holding a blue balloon that is filled with paint. Now, students were informed not to throw these balloons at each other, but obviously Jay, being a bully, does not listen, and he obviously threw this balloon at somebody, making them have blue paint on their face. Unfortunately, Jay has no idea who that person is that he hit with the balloons, so they're still kind of at a dead end. But it does add another piece of the puzzle. So knowing that Jay threw this balloon on somebody, They deduce that his sin in the letter is, "You tainted me, made me pitiful." From this, they also conclude that the letter is in chronological order, meaning that everything in this letter happened starting from the school trip. While the boys are dealing with Angel, Sunny has a headache, so she goes to the infirmary where she runs into Dr. Johan. He's changing his bandages and she's taking the headache medication, which leads to them having a little bit of small talk, which eventually leads Johan to bring up the fact that he had a stalker once upon a time, something that directly relates to Sunny. And so she asks him about it. She's like, well, what was it like? And he said, well, because of my profession, he is a psychiatrist, his patients sometimes get obsessed with him, and eventually the stalker kind of just went away. However, every now and again, that person will still pop up out of nowhere. He keeps it light conversation, and she's like, well, what would you say if your stalker showed up? And he thinks about it for a moment, and he said, well, if it was today, I'd probably let them know that I had a near-death experience from the car accident. Which then leads her to ask him about what was it like to almost die. He says, my life definitely didn't flash before my eyes like you see in the movies. It's almost an undescribable feeling. Johan is someone who's easy to talk to. I mean, he is a psychiatrist after all, and with his kind face and soft voice, it's very easy to start opening up, which is exactly what Sunny does. Sunny starts opening up about the problems that she has in her life. We don't get to know what they're actually talking about. However, after their conversation, she leaves the infirmary and starts walking, almost like she's in a daze. She walks through the halls, she walks outside through the snow, all the way to the clock tower. Now, Moon and Q are passing by one of the windows, and they notice somebody outside laying in the snow by the clock tower. And of course, they're alarmed because the letter mentions that somebody's going to be dead under the clock tower in 8 days. Obviously, this is only day number 2, so they're very confused. They rush out there. Moon, Q, they pass by Kong, so he follows them. And they see that it's Sunny. And she's laying in the snow, and she's bleeding from her wrist. It would seem she tried to take her own life. Obviously, she's taken to the infirmary and treated, but when Moon goes to visit her, he's horrified to see that she has many old scars left on her wrists. You can tell it breaks his heart. This is when you realize that even though these two people act like they're no more than strangers and barely know each other, they actually have history. It would seem that Moon and Sunny dated once upon a time, but it's very evident that Moon still dearly cares for Sunny. Everyone is shaken up at Sunny's attempt on her life. Now, that only intensifies when we realize that there is another student lurking at the school. This student hacked into the school security system so he can watch the CCTV footage from the comfort of his room. He has been quietly hiding, waiting in the shadows for the right moment to strike. That student is Ray. There's only one reason he stayed at the school: to take revenge on Jay. So Ray has been expelled from the school for destroying the school's statue. Something that he didn't actually do. He believes that Jay is the one who framed him, so he's been patiently waiting, and his patience has paid off. He ambushes Jay in his room and accuses him of being the one to get him expelled. Jay, of course, is very confused as to why Ray is there, first of all, since he's been hidden away for 2 days. He pleads with Ray. He says, "I didn't do it, I swear." It's not until Moon and Q hear the commotion where they intervene. They are also very surprised to see Ray. Moon breaks up the fight pretty quick and tries to defuse the situation and is like, "Look, Ray, calm down, we'll figure this out together. We'll find out who actually framed you and got you expelled, okay?" Which doesn't take long. The boys gather in Moon's room, and they find out the culprit pretty quickly, because Angel just straight up confesses. He's like, "Yeah, I'm the one who got you expelled, and you deserved it too." Wouldn't think that this kind of thing would come from Angel. He just doesn't seem like the type. And of course, Ray is confused. He's like, "What? We don't have any beef. Why would you do that?" Angel was set to perform in front of the whole school. He plays guitar, and I'm not sure if he has a complete band or not, but he was set to perform in front of everybody. Most importantly, his parents. Now, he is one of many students that believes this school is a prison school, and he wants out. He does not want to be locked in this school in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And his parents said if he performed well at this, then maybe they would let him, leave. So this was a very important concert for him. However, it was interrupted when Ray decided to pull a stunt by bungee jumping off the school roof, which obviously garnered everybody's attention. Thus, he performed for no one. There was no one in the audience to watch, and thus he made an embarrassment of himself in front of his parents, meaning that he would stay locked away at the prison school for yet another year. That performance was very important to him, and Ray just ruined it. So, of course, out of anger, he took his revenge on Ray and recruited Jay to help him get some fireworks or something so that he could destroy the statue. Now, Jay didn't know what Angel was planning on doing. He just got him the fireworks, but he technically, I guess, had a hand in it. After listening to Angel's story, Ray can't really argue with him, He feels very bad, and he very sincerely apologizes to Angel. He's like, I know it's obviously a little too late, but I am very sorry. You can tell Ray is not a bad guy at all. He just is the type that gets into trouble a lot because he likes to have fun, and so he does things that get into a lot of trouble typically. Like bungee jumping off the school roof. I'm like, how did he not get expelled for that? But he got expelled for blowing up a statue? Okay. Once that's settled, Moon decides to go and check on Sunny, who he finds in the cafeteria eating lunch. And, now that she's feeling better, he asks her why she did it. Why she tried to hurt herself. And why she did it by the clock tower of all places. And she says that she really doesn't know. She describes it as being in a daze. Kind of like when you're sick and you have a cold and you end up taking a little bit too much cold medicine. Your mind is kind of just hazy. That's what it was like. This conversation makes Moon think of Angel. Angel's constantly walking around in a dazed-like state. He seems to not really care about much, and he's clearly depressed. And it seems like it's common knowledge that all the students know that he's on some kind of drug, and not a prescribed one. After the boys are done talking, Angel goes back to his room. He takes some kind of drug, and he goes into a very dazed state. Now, after Angel's little confession about being the one to get Ray expelled, and how upset and scorned he seems, Jay now believes that Angel is the one who wrote the letters. And Jay takes this opportunity to torture him. So he decides to paint half of his face blue and he goes into Angel's room and pretends to be the corner monster, asking him why he would write these letters and why he would do this. And because Angel's completely tripping, he's freaking out, screaming, yelling, throwing things, and Jay is just relishing in it. Until Moon and Q come in, hearing all the commotion. Angel is so freaked out that he literally passes out. Again, it kind of seems like common knowledge that they all know that he's taking some sort of drug, and because he passed out, they're kind of like, what do we do? And they feel like they have no choice but to tell the teacher. I mean, first you have Sunny trying to end her life, and then you have Angel who's ODing on some pills. It's not good. They decide to tell Sem about the letters. They feel like, I mean, they're only on day 2 and Sunny already tried to take her own life. Angel's ODing on drugs. And it's like, they obviously need adult intervention at this point. So they tell Sem about the letters, and this leaves him contemplating. So with this new knowledge about the letters, Sem is in the teacher's office, and you can tell he's deep in thought. He ends up making a phone call, and Ray, who has been sneaking around the school for 2 days now, is spying on him. But Ray is not as slick as he thought, because Sem catches him. He catches him and he, like, throws him on the ground. He does judo. The teacher does judo, so he, like, throws him on the ground. And then he drags him into essentially a prison cell. I don't know why this school has basically a jail cell, but they do. They call it, I think it's called the nurse's room, but it's literally a jail cell. There's a toilet and a sink, a desk, and a bed. And it only opens and unlocks from the outside. So if you're inside the cell, you can't get out unless someone lets you out. There's also security cameras inside of it, which you can see on the TVs on the outside of it. This school literally has a jail in it. I'm like, are they locking up students on a regular basis? What is going on? Anyway, Sem throws Ray in this prison cell to punish him. He's like, you can stay in there all night because why are you even here? After he locks him up, he goes back to his desk, and on his desk he has the letter and a student file open on it. And he looks like he's deep in thought. And it's implied that he knows who wrote these letters. So let's do a bit of a clue recap. The letter has 8 sins written in it, 4 of which have been decoded. The sins are in chronological order, meaning it all started during the first year trip. Number 1, Jay threw a blue paint balloon, at a student's face. Then that person interacted with Angel in his room when Angel was on drugs and he thought he was the corner monster. Then this person becomes Sunny's stalker, to which Moon puts a stop to when he steals his poem and claims it as his own. 4 out of 8 sins decoded. I think they're doing a pretty good job for them only being there for 2 days. The next day, everybody notices that their teacher is like MIA. They haven't seen him since last night, and they're like, where did he go? They search everywhere for him. Every nook and cranny. They go through CCTV footage, and they have no idea where he is. There's no signs of him leaving the school grounds, which wouldn't really make sense anyway, because where would he go? They're in the middle of the mountains. And while they're searching, they come across Ray, who has been locked in the cell all night. And they're like, what's going on? And he's like, the teacher locked me in here all night, like, hello. And they're like, well, have you seen him? And he's like, I'm literally in a jail cell. How would I know where he is? And they question why he's even locked in there in the first place, and he says because their teacher's petty, okay? When the reality is it's because he was spying on the teacher. So while they're all looking for the teacher, Chi is doing the real research, okay? He's doing the real things that matter, trying to figure out what's going on with this letter. And so he starts digging into their mysterious teacher. And he finds that this teacher, Sem, is very much unqualified to be working at their school. Every teacher that works there, every staff member that works there, you know, speaks multiple languages, like they have to. It's a requirement. You know, they all have very high educations, they have at least 5 years experience in their field. They are very well vetted. And yet Sem is the only teacher that is unqualified. Which of course begs the question, how did he even get the job? And judging by the school yearbook, Sem became a permanent staff member after the first year school trip. Even more peculiar, the person who put him up to be recommended as a permanent staff member was the school's donor president, who happens to be Angel's father. Chi makes a quick deduction that during the school trip when Angel was on drugs and being attacked by the corner monster, Sem, the teacher, stepped in to help, knowing that he was on drugs. Thus, Angel's father, the donor president of the school, bribes him to keep quiet in exchange for a cushy, high-paying job at an elite boarding school. After that, they realize there's one place left to check for Sem: the teacher's dormitory. They break into the dormitory, and unfortunately they do not find Sem. But they find something much more interesting. After going through his things in his room, they find that Sem has also received a letter. Chi believes that the sin Sem has committed is, "You silenced me." They figure after they told Sem about the letter and Angel's drug use, it brought back memories of that first year trip. When Angel thought he was being attacked by the corner monster, Sem was the one to step in. He was the one push away the student with blue paint splattered on his face, a student that he remembers all too well. From what they can gather of the security footage from last night, they see Sem in the teacher's office making a phone call, and according to Ray, he was spying on Sem. And when Sem found him, he locked Ray up in a cell, probably because he was worried that Ray might have overheard the conversation and would have informed the other students. So they all go back to the cell where Ray is still, and they ask him what he heard last night, what he saw, like what was Sem doing? And Ray refuses to tell them anything until they let him out of the cell, because again, it only opens from the outside. And for some reason, they're reluctant to let him out. I don't know why, because he is the only person that is not involved in this whole letter business. He was simply there to take revenge on Jay, and, you know, that problem was already solved. So, I don't know why they're reluctant. I understand why Jay is reluctant, because clearly him and Ray don't get along. And Ray seems to be the only person that can physically put Jay in his place. So Jay is scared of him. But after the boys take a group vote, and it's 3 against 1, so they let Ray out, and Ray holds up his end of the deal. Now, he tells them that he didn't hear what Sem was talking about on the phone or who he called, but he does know that he was looking at a student's profile. So Ray brings them all to the teacher's office and pulls out the student file that Sem was looking at last night. And it is the profile of a student that goes by the name Kim Jin-soo. Now a little bit of history rundown on Jin-soo. So he graduated top of his class of middle school, and then of course he was accepted into the elite boarding school Shushin, and he had dreams of becoming a doctor. That being said, it seems he is the student that wrote these letters. Now they start combing through his files and looking for all the information they can find on him, since none of them really know who the hell he is. Records state that last year, Jin-soo stayed behind during Christmas break with another student, just as they are now. But on Christmas Day, apparently an ambulance was called to the school. They dig a little further and they find another record stating that Kim Jin-soo is deceased. They realize this letter is not a letter at all. It's a suicide note. One from last year. That means whoever sent the letter is someone who wanted them to know that they were at fault for his death. Someone who cared about Jin-soo. Someone who wanted revenge for a fallen friend. And based on the personal profile Jin-soo wrote about himself, he listed his best friend as none other than our self-proclaimed journalist, Kang. Now, Moon, Q, and Jae decide to confront Kang about his alleged friendship with Jin-soo. When they bring it up to him, he denies all allegations. He said, "I'm not friends with him, and in fact, I never even liked Jin-soo." They're all a little confused. Kang explains that he didn't like Jin-soo because he would always act pitiful towards him, simply because he's hearing impaired. He would follow him around, giving him pitiful looks, telling him to hang in there. He absolutely hated Jin-soo. Even with his claim to innocence, the group is still unsure and suspicious of him, especially after they find a secret photo album that is filled with pictures of Sunny. Pictures that Kang took. Kang tries to brush this off as not that big of a deal, but Jae presses him on it. He says that it's creepy and that he's weird for doing that in the first place. But Kang switches it around and said, "You know what? As many of those pictures as I took, every photo, every time I was taking a picture of Sunny, you were always around, always lurking around a corner, always in her vicinity. So if I'm suspicious, we should be just as suspicious of you." Jae is incredibly annoying, and he really never ever has proof of anything. I mean, he thought Kang was the one who sent the letters first, and then he switched it to Angel, and now he's back to Kang. He gets one piece of tiny evidence and just runs with it. Their little interrogation is interrupted when Sunny bursts into the room, and she's like, "I don't know what you guys are doing, but we have bigger problems, okay? Communications are out. Phone, internet, everything. On top of that, Sam is still nowhere to be found, and Dr. Johan has an extremely high fever, all while they're cut off from the outside world. They are completely isolated." Upon hearing this information, the group go down to the main security office, like in the basement, and Chi checks the computers. He checks the computers and then he goes to the back and looks at all the wiring system and realizes that someone has jammed it and destroyed it with a piece of paper, and that's why none of the communications work. Now, they assume it was Kang because upon looking at CCTV footage, they see that he went in there earlier. So they assume that he's the one who did this. Of course, this just adds fuel to the fire, but Sunny, being the only level-headed one, is like, "Guys, there's a much bigger suspect at hand. Sam. He's the only one who's actually missing here. We can't find him anywhere. He went MIA after figuring out about the letter, so obviously he would also have a lot more to lose than us. What do we have to lose compared to him? What he did was technically illegal. He took a bribe. He's working at a school that he's not qualified to be working at. he knew about a student's drug use. Like, he has a lot more to lose if this stuff goes public. In the light of Sem still being absent and Kang being rather suspicious, they decide that they need to get out of this place. And it's kind of getting a little too late at night to go anywhere now, so they plan to leave in the morning and find civilization. But until then, they need to stick close. Sunny, being the only girl, is literally in the girls' dormitory all by herself. And so Moon walks her back, and she's kind of like, you know, I'm kind of scared, and if I ask you to stay here with me, will you? And, you know, he kind of refuses because maybe it's a little inappropriate. However, he does give her a whistle, and he tells her if she blows this, he will come running wherever she is. That being said, everybody else goes about their night. The boys walk around like they're on patrol or something, when suddenly they hear the eerie screeching sound of a whistle. All the boys start freaking out and they run towards the whistle sound. Moon, Q, Jae, Angel, and Chi all go running to the courtyard, and they see Sunny standing there, blowing the whistle, and she looks stunned, horrified even. Moon puts a gentle hand on her shoulder and asks her what's going on. With no words, she points towards the fountain. And as the wind blows and the snow moves, it is revealed that there is a body at the base of the fountain. And as they get a little closer, they see that that body is Sem. Sem is dead. Okay, so that is the end of part 1, The Letter. Sorry to leave a bit of a cliffhanger until the second video, but I just thought it's a good ending, right? Anyway, hopefully you come back for part 2, which is much more intense. Things definitely take a dark turn. Yeah. I don't have anything else to say. Okay, bye.